Hello and welcome. Today is Sunday, the 21st of February 2016. My name is Chris Ellis and I'm bringing you another update from the Fullnode project. I have been working with some of the developers of IPFS, the Interplanetary File System, on IRC today to try and get like a good sort of working demo of their software that they've worked very hard on. You can see IPFS is running here on the Bitcoin Fullnode. If you joined us when we were in Hamburg for the CCC conference, you'll remember that we did a live demonstration actually showing Soumitra in India sharing us a document from India to Hamburg, fully encrypted end-to-end using IPFS. Well, today what I would like to do is show something that we've kind of been working on today. In terms of the timeline of the Fullnode project, Bitcoin version 0.12, I've been told, is not officially released yet. It's only been tagged for release. So I perhaps misspoke. I was a bit too preemptive the other day when I said it's ready to go. So I've been told it will be ready in the next day or two, within the next 48 hours. Version 12 of Bitcoin will be released, and then I'll be in a position to actually start installing and distributing the disk images. In the meantime, if you're following me at Mr. Chris Ellis on Twitter, you will be able to, we'll go through some of the instructions that I've uploaded to my gist, the part of my GitHub repo, which I will share with you in due course, also in the descriptions of the previous videos that we've done here on the World Crypto Network, so you can catch up. That's only if you're like, really into this and you like really want to stay on top of things. Otherwise, feel free just to hang around and wait for the official version to be released, and I'll upload the IMG files. So yeah, one of the important parts of this project for me was always not just about financial inclusion and all of these kind of commonly touted advantages of apparently of using Bitcoin, but for me this Fullnode project was always about giving every citizen a voice, and you can't do that unless people have access to the same technology. If some people have got private access and special access to technology over other people, then those people that have a concentrated power, like these large companies like Google and Facebook with all the servers and the bandwidth, are able to have a higher amplitude. So in other words, if you're poor at the moment, you don't have a voice in the market. And so the idea of distributing these little single board, affordable, low-cost computers to the world is not simply just to like airdrop in a kind of techno-colonialist fashion, this technology completely abstract of their surroundings. Remember that Maslow's hierarchy of needs begins with psychological and safety at the very bottom of the pyramid, and where psychological and safety includes security. And one of the things that these Fullnodes come with, of course, is encryption. They come with Tor, end-to-end encryption and anonymity tools. They come with Bitcoin for financial inclusion. But the thing I want to talk about today is IPFS, which is Interplanetary File System. It was invented by Juan Bennett, a very talented guy. This is an idea that I've been waiting for the last 4 years. It was something that I had been hacking myself using Git repos with submodules inside of them for a very long time. But essentially what IPFS is a file structure that works over the internet. He calls it the permanent web. And the reason I think he does that is because he wants to convey that once you have distributed, once you run an IPFS node, you have the ability to start hosting content, or the verb actually they use is pinning. That's the concept that they use, pinning. So you can download a web page, or as we're about to demonstrate to you, an unfolding story hosted on GitHub. And then you are able to start distributing that out to other people, rather than everybody going to Forbes magazine, Forbes.com, to download the article, everyone going to Facebook in order to get the article. Everybody starts hosting the article independently. And the way it works is because the network is content addressable. That means that rather than addressing the particular article via sort of http://bbc.co.uk// or the story title. Instead, we address the actual content by its cryptographic hash, which will be the same anywhere in the world, provided that you're running the same software. So I'm going to introduce Janine to you. She's been working on this latest unfolding story of Apple versus FBI. Janine, say hi.
Hi there.
So I'm going to share the screen with everybody. The link's in the description below. So tell us about this story and like what motivated you to get to start, like, you know, pulling all this information together.
Well, I first created the Git repo, I think, yesterday. I'm not quite sure when I started it, actually, because I've been working on it.
Yeah.
Feels like I've been working on it for days, but it might only be a day. The whole Apple versus FBI story, it's a lot longer, but it actually, this part of it started on the night of February 16th, because that was when the first court order was released. Yeah, and when I made this repo, I kind of assumed that most of the people that would be reading it kind of have a basic understanding of what event it's referring to, which is the terrorist attack in San Bernardino, California. Nope. Something. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just showing the links, because one of the things that you're doing here is you're linking to documents, you're linking to original files using GitHub, and you're pulling out all these quotes, you're using citations, but then in addition to that, you're also hosting locally mirrored content. And as you can see here, using Git, it actually has a hash. So Git itself is using content addressed system similarly to IPFS. So you've written a story, you've done this in Markdown, which is the way that GitHub uses. It's similar to HTML, but it has less syntax, so it's kind of easier to do. You put links to all the various sections, and then, like a good journalist, you've done your fact checking and you've linked to all the actual original links, plus in your Git repo you've also got locally hosted files like the PDF with a statement from the FBI, just in case, for example, that would be taken down at some point and then your article is linking to a dead link. Is that right?
Right. Yeah.
Because one of the problems with the internet at the moment is that websites can be taken down and censored, and so then your article wouldn't make as much sense anymore because it would link up to something that's no longer there.
Yeah, so what I did is I have two layers of protection. In the actual article, I'm linking to a web archived through the Internet Archive. It's a copy that they have of the documents. So that's what I'm actually linking to in the story. But if you go to the bottom of this page, then I have a section for mirror links, which it links directly to the other files that I have in this repository of those documents. And so far, I have the first court order, and then I have the second one saying that it was compelling Apple to follow the orders of the first court order. And then I have that statement from the FBI, which is actually an email that was sent by a journalist from Ars Technica to the CAO of San Bernardino County, and then they basically copy pasted a statement from a public relations lady from the FBI that that was their statement.
That's great. Okay. So one of the things that we wanted to be able to demonstrate was, obviously GitHub is fine, but GitHub itself is a centralized social network, and it just happens to be run by really, you know, good people that have good reputations, but it's not ideal. Let's give a little bit of context before we go into why what I'm about to show you is so important and relevant today in the age of hypermedia, and in particular that article that I shared with everybody the other day on histories of things to come. So there is precedent for this. For example, Bellingcat is a citizen journalist website that investigates news stories in real time, and apparently using open source software, they pull together all the facts of various different news stories collaboratively with a group of people, and are then able to prove certain facts that have been reported in the media, or dispute them, as the case may be. And they do this by, you know, looking at the direction of the shadows across pictures to see what time of day it was. And, you know, they use all these kinds of techniques to do this kind of sort of fact checking. One of the problems with this form of citizen journalism is that it is still centralized. So whatever software they're using, and it's never really been entirely clear what software is being used to collaborate on these stories. It seems to me that Bellingcat seems to have this kind of very sort of anti-Russian slant to it. And I'm all for attitudinal journalism, don't get me wrong, but it's not itself without a little bit of bias, it would appear. You see here they've got all the arrows and they're pointing to things. But importantly, what is good about Bellingcat is that it is engaging, and the fact is it is getting citizens and people to engage in the news rather than just passively sit back in their armchairs and watch it be fed to them in this kind of 24-hour news cycles. So Bellingcat is very good. It was created by this guy, Elliot Higgins. I have a lot of respect for him and all the work that he is doing, but I think that we can do better. I first started to do this back in 2014 with my Moolah investigation. This was the former cryptocurrency exchange Moolah, or MintPal, which went bust and took a lot of people's money with it. The guy that was behind that is now actually facing a court battle. And you can see there was like an evidence bundle that I put together, and there were links, with timestamps to all the various, pages that I was finding on the internet with evidence and all the different Bitcoin addresses and so forth that were implicated. And then what I was doing was I was timestamping it into the blockchain. And so I kind of left that project because at the time it was, there were other things that I had to do, and all I really wanted to do with this project was just demonstrate what was possible. But now what we're doing, thanks to Janine and also the Fullnode project, is we're actually going to demonstrate to you how this can finally be decentralized, so that anyone with a Fullnode will be able to download Janine's work. In fact, you can do that in the description below. If you're running IPFS, you can actually do an IPFS get command. It will pull all of her work to your local computer, and then you can then choose to pin that hash and that folder, so that then you can serve it out to other people. And the more people that do that across the network, the more difficult it is for any kind of government agency or any corporation to start censoring that information, because once it's been said, it can't be unsaid. It can't be removed again, which is important for freedom of speech, because the underlying assumption here is that the answer to freedom of speech is more speech. If there's something that is said that is untrue, the answer is not to try and delete it or remove it. The answer, I put it to you, is to have more speech on top, to nuance what came before. So that's the premise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the Raspberry Pi terminal. And what am I going to do here? I'm going to try and show you what we've got up on the screen. So let me put this on a tripod. Okay, so we have our Fullnode here running IPFS. Does that look okay? You can read that okay?
It's a little blurry.
A little blurry, okay. Well, and then what I'll do is I will share my...
Looks like you just need to focus it.
Yeah, it's okay. What I'm going to do, so I'm in my home folder at the moment, and we're running IPFS Station. Now, IPFS Station, I've been told by the developer that's running it, it's still a little bit unstable, and it does tend to crash a little bit now and again. But hopefully he's going to be able to get us something by the end of February, or perhaps by March at some point, so that we can start delivering it. That might mean that we need to ask permission from you as a community on the time rollout, because originally, remember, we did promise that we were going to start rolling out the pledged nodes from December in February this month. So what I might choose to do, with your permission, is to delay that by a few weeks, to give IPFS some time to improve the stability of their software, so that we can actually get this working for people in a way that doesn't involve them, doing all of these kind of, terminal commands and so on. So one of the things that we can do is, because I'm hosting this story on my laptop, is I can actually run this command, which is in the description below, and you'll see what it's done there is it's actually downloaded that from both my laptop and possibly the other Pi that I'm running it on, and then it's put it into a folder called Apple versus FBI. You see that there. So now I can cd into that folder. I can go ls-la, and you can see that this is now a copy of the Git repo that Janine is working on. And you can see that because of the .git folder. So let's just do .git. So -la, when you do ls-la, what you're actually doing is saying, show me all the files, even the hidden ones. And then we go ls, and you can see all of the Git files. Now Git, even though Git itself is a decentralized piece of software, it still requires some degree of centralization in order for it to be usable. So we still need a place, a site that we can go to where we can actually see in a usable way what files are being worked on. One of the advantages of IPFS is it uses these things called Merkle DAGs. So if I go into this file here and I click on all of my pins, you'll be able to see a list of all the hashes. So the one I'm looking for, let me just double check what the hash is, ends in NZ. Oh, damn it, we crashed. It's live, there's nothing I can do about it. Okay, so what happens is that you can now share that hash with other people, and even when you make changes to the hash, it will show you all of the changes that have been made. So I'm just going to restart, because that's the instability issue I was talking about. But you can see how to do this. The full instructions are here. They're in the description below. You can basically git clone Janine's work just using Git normally. You can add it to IPFS like so. So you could just simply create your own repository if you wanted to and just upload it to IPFS. And then go to another computer and just type in IPFS get, put whatever the hash happens to be. If you're using Janine's one here and she hasn't made any changes by the time this video goes out, then obviously you'll still be able to use this hash. Otherwise, you'll have to use something different. You then use the flag O, and then you put in the directory that you want to save it into, and it will create the directory for you. So I'm just going to load up the Raspberry Pi again because it crashed, unfortunately. IPFS works just fine if you just run the daemon in the command line. The only problem is the software, the graphical user interface is just a little bit buggy. That's all it is. So let me try that again. Hopefully it will work this time. Does that look okay? You see that all right?
No, it's pretty blurry. I can't see anything that's in the UI.
Is it just low resolution, is it? Or
yeah, it's low resolution.
Okay. Well, I'm going to cd into the station folder, like so. So hopefully, can you see that?
Yeah, that's a little better.
npm, and then I'm going to click npm start, and then that's going to run a bunch of Node.js software, and that takes a little while to do, but that's going to set up the IPFS daemon, and it's going to start running IPFS locally, and then hopefully it should give us the little dialog box down at the bottom. Are there any questions from the troll box, by the way? Have we got a little chat box down there? Any action?
So far, there's nothing.
Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to getting this out there, because once this starts, really rolling, there'll be, anyone for not very many dollars can start becoming their own journalist and their own publication. And publishing unfalsifiable cryptographic links to articles. Right, so here we go. Let's hopefully this will load up. If not, It will be unfortunate. Okay, yeah, it doesn't look like it's going to load up, unfortunately. Let me just see if I've got anything. Oh yeah, there we go. So that's now loaded up. And then we can go to the console. It also shows you how many peers are connected to the network. Let me just go to, there we go. So you see how many peers you're connected to. It loads up the console here. And click on files, click pinned up, and that's where it crashes. Okay, well, at least we know what the bug is. Let me just see if I can do one locally on my hipster machine. No, it's not actually showing it on my hipster machine at the moment. Let's go. No, the UI isn't really working. I do have the Firefox extension running, which I can just quickly show you. So IPFS does actually have a Firefox extension, which I'm running in here. But for some reason, it's not showing me all of the files that I've got, which is kind of annoying. But this is one of the things that I would really like the IPFS development team to work on, because I think it's just so exciting, right? Like you could have somebody report a story in real time in a foreign country somewhere, and then they could just simply publish it to IPFS, tweet out the hash, and then people all over the world could start downloading it. And once that information is spread, there's literally no way that the government can intervene and stop it. Now, there are going to be some moral hazards along the way, because obviously you can see a situation where if the information is permanent and it's distributed, you could see like a blackmail market emerging. You know, if somebody is has compromising images taken of them and things like this. But I would argue that this is not a new problem, because this has existed already. Once you published information and you broadcast it, you can't prevent other people from persisting it locally. So once they've witnessed something and they've downloaded something onto their hard drives, it's very difficult to go around to every single person's house and seize all of their computers. One of the problems with web browsers at the moment is that when they persist data, they do it in a cache which is hidden from you. They do it in a folder, a local content folder, which is actually obscured from the user. And so you have no choice but, when you go on the internet, to just be a passive consumer. You're just consuming content. In order for you to actually save out that content into a directory that's addressable and visible to you as a user, you usually have to like right click on the image, or you have to click save as, and then you have to save it into your documents folder. Otherwise, it's usually just persisted in cache in a hidden folder on your computer. IPFS is completely different to that. It's much more decentralized. Anyone can become a server. You don't need very expensive computing hardware. There is a little bit more work that the team needs to do just to get the graphical user interface running. But if you already run a Bitcoin Fullnode with the software that I distributed back in December and January, you will be able to download Janine's work already on IPFS using that command below. You will need to set up IPFS daemon, get it running. I would recommend you don't do it at the same time that Bitcoin is running. So you should probably try to quit Bitcoin first, just because the Raspberry Pi, you can't run both at the same time very easily. But where we're trying to take this is that in the future, particularly with what Ollie and Steve are working on, is the ability to put those IPFS links and hashes into the blockchain itself using the Python library that Peter Todd wrote. So actually create a raw transaction, put in the IPFS link into the blockchain, and then once people start to propagate that link out across the network, they'll be able to download the Git repository, add any evidence to it, be able to edit it, and then as you do so, the hash will change, but what IPFS does is it keeps a complete log of all the different changes that have been made. So you'll be able to see all the different changes and which key made what change, and it's completely traceable, verifiable, and accountable. So this is really exciting. I think the only work now that needs to be done, like the underlying technology is there, and that's working really well. I think the only thing that we need to do now is to get the user interface working well, and to spread the word and get the message out and educate people on how to use it. Janine, what do you think?
Well, the only thing that I really wanted to actually talk about from the story itself, I mean, it's a really long piece, so I'm not going to obviously read the whole thing, but the part that I wanted to bring up was because Bitcoin Group talked about this topic a few days ago, and one of the things I wanted to dispute was maybe if you could bring it up, share screen so that they can see it when I look at it. The section on whether the FBI is actually demanding that Apple break encryption, which, yeah, it's like halfway.
Whereabouts is that?
Yeah, you can just click on B, section B, and it should take you right to it. Yeah. So okay. One of the things I wanted to dispute was whether the FBI is actually demanding that Apple, so-called, in quotes, break encryption, which I actually don't think they are. And I give an explanation why, because the first thing is that, so we have to look at what they're actually asking Apple to do. They're saying that Apple needs to build a custom mobile iOS the operating system for a mobile iPhone, which has 2 security features disabled. So this isn't actually doing anything to break the encryption itself. It's just disabling 2 security features that have to do with logging in with the passcode, which is the 10 try limit and then time delays. And then the second thing that they're asking is that because in order for this custom operating system to work on the iPhone, is that Apple has to sign it with their developer, because only software which is signed with their software key is able to actually work on an iPhone. So the really the only encryption part that we're dealing with is authentication, and that's really important because authentication is not only a principle of information security, it's also an element of cryptography. So why is this distinction important? That it's about that the only area of cryptography that it involves is authentication. The reason that's important is because another information security principle is confidentiality. Now, Apple has given its customers this expectation of confidentiality, not only from hackers, governments, people trying to read their data. It's not only an expectation of confidentiality from those people, it's also an expectation of confidentiality from Apple itself. So, but then the problem is that, they're saying that this is breaking encryption, but if Apple is not supposed to be a party to the encrypted communications, then why is this a risk to the encryption and the data confidentiality of the customer? That's because there is security vulnerabilities that Apple has. These are already security vulnerabilities that exist. Apple does not actually have to create any new vulnerabilities. The great vulnerability here is Apple itself having the ability to backdoor their own products. How are they able to do that? Because they can create a custom operating system, and all they have to do is sign it with their key, and then it will work on these new phones. And now the biggest thing of this was that it wasn't supposed to work on newer phones. Turns out that might not be the case. I'm still looking into it. But Apple itself is saying, no, this operating system would actually work on new phones, because apparently the secure enclave feature, which is on newer models of the iPhone, apparently doesn't protect data from this operating system if it was to be installed on any iPhone. So apparently any iPhone is at risk. So getting back to the question of whether the FBI is demanding Apple break encryption, that's actually misleading. What's actually happening here is that the encryption is already broken because Apple has vulnerabilities in their authentication system, which are now being taken advantage of by the FBI, because the FBI know that they can, install software on these products.
Right. So in other words, Apple already have the ability to backdoor their own software. So when you use one of these little hipster devices and you encrypt it, it's true that in its current state, no third party aside from Apple themselves can get into the device unless your password is very weak, or unless you give them voluntary access to it. But Apple have the ability to remotely upload new software to your device, which will then itself have access to that data. Now, presumably, I don't know, but they can't force you to do that, can they? Because normally when I have to do a software upgrade, it keeps prompting me to do the software upgrade. And this is one of the things that Microsoft have been doing with the Windows 10 malware distribution. Microsoft recently have been trying to spread this virus called Windows 10. And so if you're running like Windows 7 or Windows 8, it will have pestware built into it, which will keep pestering you until eventually you submit and say, stop, enough already, okay, install the virus. And then it then downloads Windows 10 onto your computer. But I don't think Apple have the ability to force that on users, because they would have needed to have preempted that ahead. They would have had to have thought of that ahead of time and made it so that the iPhone would then subversively start downloading updates.
As far as I know, they don't have the ability to force the update remotely. But if supposedly the FBI is able to install a new operating system, if they are in possession of the device, then apparently it is possible, just not remotely.
Right. Oh, so if they're in possession of the device, one second. If they're in possession of the device, though, they need to unlock it before they can do anything.
Well, no, that's the point. Apparently, they're able to install this operating system without having to unlock the phone.
Oh, they would physically have to plug it in, and then they would be able to get into it. Okay, they would root it.
Yes, because the thing is, it supposedly will work on this phone in this case, because it's an 5C, which is older. Newer phones, that was the big deal recently, is that it wasn't supposed to work on them because newer phones have secure enclave, and everyone's saying, no, your phones are safe as long as you have a password plus a strong password plus secure enclave, which it still looks like a strong password would be good enough protection, but apparently secure enclave is not as secure as we thought, because now Apple is saying that will not protect phones. So yeah, the basic point.
Yeah. Because Apple have the master key, they have the master private key, they have the ability to.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, the main point that I wanted to get out of this, at least in this video, is to dispute the claim that the FBI is asking them to break encryption. I summarized it differently. I said that the FBI is demanding that Apple take advantage of a system security flaw which already exists. So, and the reason I wanted that to be clear is because this whole debate is about like FBI versus encryption, or, what was it? National security versus encryption. And I think it's the reason that's dangerous is because both the people that are in opposition to Apple and the people that are supporting Apple are hedging this whole controversy as, encryption versus national security. And not as national security, but as like FBI against encryption, which in this case, that is not true, because it actually has very little to do with secure encryption. That's the problem. So when you have both sides saying, oh, this is about protecting encryption, it's like, no, it's not. The encryption is already broken. Now it's just about, this is actually more of a free speech case. This is more of a, obviously, because the Fourth Amendment doesn't really apply here anymore, because the owner of the phone has already consented to a search of his phone. So now it's become a matter of the First Amendment, not the Fourth Amendment.
So the Fourth Amendment is to do with the ability for somebody to secure their person, to secure themselves. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. Right. And in order for a device to be searched, I mean, there's so many there's so many different explanations for whether or not, people's devices are protected under the Fourth Amendment, because they're protected in different ways depending on what is being accessed. But basic premise is that in order for a device to be searched, you have to have a warrant, which in this case, the FBI does have a warrant, and the official owner of the phone, which is not actually the terrorist who died, but it was the employer, San Bernardino Health Department. They have consented to the search, so the Fourth Amendment doesn't really apply anymore because they've already given consent to the search.
Okay.
And so, yeah, the reason the First Amendment applies is because there's already some cases that have set the precedent that code can equal speech. And so if the FBI is going to force someone in Apple to write software that eventually ends up making one of their phones less secure, then that would be a First Amendment issue because you're basically compelling speech if you say code equals speech.
Okay. For me, this is really about state and industry working together. And I know I bang on about it a lot, but that was basically, Benito Mussolini famously said in 1935 that, industry's interests were aligned with state interests, and that if necessary, the state had the ability to control and coerce industry into doing what it wanted to do. And so for me, this is really about how we separate state interests from corporate interests. And because corporations' interests are supposed to be aligned with that of the customer. They have a duty of care to their customer. They also have a duty of care to their shareholders, of course. They're there to make money, but hopefully that they make profit as a result of getting something right, that they've anticipated the demands of the market and the consumer, that the consumer has bought the product and they're happy with the product and they're using it. When the state starts getting involved and coerces the corporations into breaking the cryptography, which presumably wasn't that robust in the first place by the sounds of it, then we start to get into the thorny issue as whether or not the state should ever have the right to be able to intervene and tell corporations what to do with their software if it's already broken. Now, there's the reason why I want to frame it in this way and not in the way of like, well, should we use encryption or not? Or how is this different from a house? Because houses can still be broken into. Like if I lock my door, I'm not literally physically stopping you from getting into my house. What I'm doing is I'm making it difficult and inconvenient for you to get into my house. That's very different to strong crypto. With strong crypto, like it literally, you cannot break it. Like there's nothing you can do to break it. If you use obscurity on top of encryption and steganography and other techniques, it's not even a case of you being able to break in. It's a case of you needing to find out where the hell my house is. You know that my house exists, but now let's say I've uploaded it somewhere on IPFS and it's hidden in a hash somewhere, but you have no idea where to go after it. And then even if you were able to find it, let's say I've encrypted it using, Veracrypt, the new version of TrueCrypt. Now you've got to brute force this thing with various supercomputers, and it could take you several decades or hundreds of years or until the end of the universe. And so this is very different to me securing my home with locks, because yeah, you can have a really, really strong lock, but you can have much more powerful bombs and door rams and, kicking in doors. So really locking your house is just really posturing. You're communicating to the community around you that this is your private space. And if you're going to try and break in, you're going to make it as inconvenient as possible, and you're going to leave evidence everywhere, and you're going to make a loud noise when you're doing it, and it's going to be easier for you to be detected. That is a category distinction between what we're talking about with hard crypto. That is one line that you could pursue philosophically as an investigation. The reason I'm tempted not to go down that route is because there's a certain inevitability to this. We cannot unlearn what we have learned. That is an inherent risk in pedagogy. You cannot unlearn what has been learned. And once we have learned and we have introduced these encryption tools, because presumably they were useful to someone at some point, that's why they were invented, you cannot uninvent them. And so there's always throughout history, ever since the discovery of fire and the invention of the wheel. I mean, can you imagine when fire was first discovered, you know, people going around saying, you can't tell anyone about this because everyone will be setting everybody on fire. It'll be a nightmare, you know? Like once you kind of worked it out and one person has witnessed another person creating fire, it's like, what do you physically can't stop it, right? So as encryption becomes more distributed and more people start to learn, and children are born into a world where we have open source encryption tools and we have low cost circuit boards like the Raspberry Pi, and we have this sort of end-to-end encryption, you actually physically can't do anything about it. Because even if you're the most powerful government in the world, you don't have the resources, the energy to go after every single citizen and stop them from using this technology. Instead, you have to work out, okay, what do we do now, given that we are living in a world where this is extant, where this technology exists, whether we like it or not, there is nothing we can do to stop it. What are our responsibilities and how do we adapt and change? And what the FBI looks like they're doing is they're trying to use the old tactics borrowed straight out of the fascist playbook. It's like, let's try and control the corporations. Let's deputize the corporations, because it's easy to deputize a corporation because they have to reside somewhere. They need a head office and all their employees have to descend on that office. And so they are addressable, they are fixed, and they have to report and they have to file and they have to pay their taxes. They have to do all these things. Now, corporations like Apple, Google, etc. will try to play jurisdictional arbitrage. They'll have head offices in Ireland. They'll have head offices in the Cayman Islands. They'll try to maximize their tax efficiencies in such a way that they put all their gains in the low tax threshold regions of the world and they put all their losses in the high tax threshold regions of the world. But they cannot escape the regulators when it comes to retail and distributing physical items like the iPhone, because they've got to put them in stores. They've got to have retail centers. And so this is where the government and the state have leverage. And I think this is going to be a very interesting case. I think, Janine, it's fantastic that you're doing this on GitHub, because it basically means that if there are any inaccuracies or anything that's incomplete in the story, anyone right now can go to the link in the description below this video, go to your Git repo and put in a pull request. If there is something wrong with what you are saying as a journalist, rather than just like going on the ft.com website and our Alphaville or whatever and just telling everyone what the truth is, like your version of the truth, just like blasting it out, what you're doing is you're being much more humble and you're saying, here's what I've discovered, you know, here's the evidence that I found. If you found something different, you can actually edit it in place. If I think that you're correct, I will merge that change into my branch of this Git repository. If I disagree with you, then you're free to take mine and duplicate it and create your own version somewhere else. So I think what you're doing is fantastic. I think actually what you're doing is quite groundbreaking. Full disclosure, Janine is my girlfriend, so I'm a little bit biased, but I think that what you are doing is original. I think other people have tried to do this before, but they've done it in a very centralized way, which is why, you know, companies like, you know, places like Bell and Cat, I think come under natural skepticism that they've got this kind of pro-NATO, pro-Western agenda, and they're kind of like anti-Putin and all this kind of thing. I think that somewhat does an injustice to them, because I think those guys over there work really, really hard. And I don't want to take that away from them, but clearly you need accountability, you need decentralization in something like this. Journalism right now is in a desperate need of radical overhaul. Basically, everyone gets to be their own WikiLeaks now. Everyone gets to be able to leak information anonymously, securely, with verifiable, traceable evidence. You can simply use the software that I'm running on the Fullnode. You can follow the instructions at fullnode.protip.is. More updates will be made to that repo in the coming days. And as I said at the top of this video, we will be getting back to you also in the next 48 hours with the news on the latest release of Bitcoin version 12 or 0.12, which is due out anytime soon, as they say. So thank you very much for joining this. This was just an update. We're trying to put out frequent updates to keep everyone on top of things. I would like to have some kind of town hall meeting around the Fullnode in the coming weeks, because I would like to have an extension added to the original deadline that I set for the pledge nodes from December's crowdfund. The reason for that extension is that, having spoken to the developers at IPFS, it sounds like they need a little bit more time to get their graphical user interface ready. As you could see, it was a little bit buggy on the video there. It was crashing a little bit. So once they've had time to kind of work out how long that's going to take, I will get back to you as a community and people that have supported us. Thank you very much, by the way, because I would like your permission to have a couple of weeks added to an extension before I start distributing these out to places like Botswana and South America, just so that, you know, the user experience there is good, because once we've distributed these nodes, it's going to be quite difficult for us to do kind of remote support. I want to make sure that the software that people receive is as good as it can be at the time. And if that means waiting a couple of weeks for some developers to improve the software, I would like to do that if possible. So thank you very much for supporting us. You can also support Janine, whose Bitcoin address is in today's update. If you're running ProTip, please do send a tip. It's protip.is if you haven't got it already for the Chrome browser. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.